Hello, everybody. This is Mayor Muriel Bowser, and I am honored to join you in celebrating the 30th anniversary of Friendship Place. In your 30 years of service to Washington, D.C., Friendship Place has become one of the district's most valuable partners in the work to end homelessness. What started as a small group of concerned residents is now an organization that serves families, single adults, veterans, and our young people. Today, Friendship Place is known for getting results, for your willingness to take on any challenge, and for the compassion and high quality of services you provide Washingtonians experiencing homelessness. Even in the middle of this year-long public health emergency, you helped us open the Brooks, the district's 7th short-term family housing program. And whether it's at the Brooks or La Casa or out in the community, your commitment to ending homelessness and improving lives is clear. So thank you for your service, and I look forward to our continued partnership.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our annual Spring Symposium. I'm Chris Rutledge, Chief Development Officer at Friendship Place, and we are so excited to have you here to learn about our work over the last 30 years, learn about how the issue of homelessness has evolved over the last 30 years, both in DC and nationally, and really to hear about where we might go going forward. This is an exciting time for us as we celebrate our 30th anniversary, and also a great opportunity to think about ways we can do things differently and how we can just continue to be of service throughout the community and really the nation at large. I want to take a moment before we start to recognize a friend of ours, a board member, an ally, a friend of ours, Walton Adams, who, as many of us know, passed away a few weeks ago in a tragic accident. If I might ask all of us to just take a few seconds to think about Walton and remember him, and keep in mind the spirit with which he served us. So please just take a moment here. Thank you. Also, you just heard from Mayor Bowser talk about the work we're doing and how exciting it is that we're celebrating our anniversary. It's a great honor to have Mayor Bowser join us and be part of this. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you for all you've done to help those who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness throughout your tenure. And you're going to make a difference throughout many years to come because of what you've done and put into place. We have one other friend who's joined us by a letter that I'm going to take a moment to read. I don't know if we might be able to have it on the screen here. Oh, there we go. We're going to show that. We have kindly got a letter from President and Michelle Obama, and I'm going to take a moment, if you don't mind, to read that so you can see what they had to say. Dear Jean-Michel, I wanted to congratulate you on the 30th anniversary of Friendship Place, and thank you for everything you and the team are doing to address homelessness in the DC area. As you know, Michelle and I have been fans of yours for years. I still remember helping serve Thanksgiving dinner at your Feast with Friends event back in 2015, and I know Michelle has always appreciated the work you're doing to end veteran homelessness. Too often, politicians who live and work in Washington don't spend enough time addressing the issues in their own backyards. It's why the work you're doing to help individuals, families, veterans, children, young adults, and seniors rebuild their lives is so important. And I'm glad Friendship Place has gotten the national recognition you deserve. With the pandemic putting an even heavier burden on so many families, I'm also happy to hear that you're launching the Hope Campaign to do even more. One of the joys of living in DC has been getting to know the different communities in the city and the people like you and your team who are making them even stronger. So from one neighbor to another, thank you for everything you're doing to help people get back on their feet. I'm sure you'll make an even bigger difference over the next 30 years. And again, that is so kind of the President and Ms. Obama to share that with us and to help celebrate us as we're going forward. And I'm going to now, without further ado, toss to Ray Suarez, who is going to be our MC for this afternoon. So Ray, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be with you all for another year, even in these continuing bizarre conditions. At such an important milestone, 30 years. I hope when we mark 31 next year with our Spring Symposium, we can all see each other finally face to face with the added benefit of what we've learned along the way during the pandemic that'll make it possible for us to keep on distributing audio and video to increase the reach of this program, to look for new audiences. We have a great panel with us today. I'm joined by Duff, a co-founder of Friendship Place, 3 board members, businesswoman Brenda Small, Nan Roman of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and Harold Sims, community-based board member who first came to Friendship Place seeking employment services in 2012 through the program Aim Higher. And finally, Jean-Michel Giraud, Friendship Place president and CEO. Welcome, panel, to you all. I want to remind everyone who's watching, wherever you are, that you're invited to send questions for our panelists. Zoom makes it easy. There's a Q&A bar right down there at the bottom. Click there, type in your question, and if there's a particular panelist to which you want to specifically direct your point or question, mention that. I'll get to as many of them as possible before we close the program. To begin the conversation, at the beginning, we'll go back to the birth of Friendship Place. So joining us, along with all the panelists, with introductory remarks, is Jean Duff. Jean, good to see you.
Thank you, Ray, and hello, everybody. 30 years of Friendship Place, my goodness. It's astonishing. You know, there wasn't much friendship going around in the 2nd District Police Station in 1991. In fact, there was a lot of shouting and real fears about the city's proposal to open a 50-man overnight shelter in Guy Mason Recreation Centre. We were all caught up in a bad case of NIMBYism, not in my backyardism. Lois Williams was there, a renowned fair housing and civil rights lawyer and a neighbour, sadly deceased some years ago. Lois and I got together with many other local leaders to see if we could collaborate with local churches and synagogues, businesses and neighbours to reach out and support the more than 100 men and women whom we counted in an overnight census, living in the woods, living in the alleys, and living in the shadows of our neighbourhoods. It's so easy to feel scared and overwhelmed by the complexity of issues that someone who's homeless is dealing with, and to feel that there's absolutely nothing that any one person can do. What was needed was a way to combine efforts and work together, small scale, person to person, neighborhood base, linking to services, and staying the course through the ups and downs of recovery. And Friendship Place is that collaborative system, designed to accompany people who are rebuilding their lives. It combines professional skills across many disciplines with the gifts and assets of committed volunteers and local institutions. The founding ethos of Friendship Place of neighbors helping neighbors is grounded in the belief of the worthiness and dignity of every single person, and in the belief that accompanying a person in great need is indeed an exchange of gifts. We could never have imagined 3 decades ago that Friendship Place would live so fully into its name, Friendship Place, and that it would grow to help thousands of people citywide to rebuild their lives, while still holding firm to the ethos of friendship, of person-centered, dignified accompaniment. Thank you so much to the whole team.
Nan Roman, you get to see this problem from not only a local perspective, but a national one as well. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Great to be here and an honor to serve on the board of Friendship Place in the neighborhood in which I live. You know, it's also a good time, I think, to remind ourselves that we don't really have to have homelessness in the nation. And indeed, we haven't always had widespread homelessness in the nation. I think the last time we didn't really have it was the 1970s. In the 1970s, there was enough affordable housing for everybody who needed it. There were a lot of other problems. People had substance abuse problems. They had untreated mental illness. There were many poor people, but yet we really didn't have homelessness. And the reason for that was that there was an adequate supply of housing that people could afford, and that people earned enough to pay for that housing. And around about 1980, that equation started to change. There was a shortage of affordable housing, and we started here in DC to see the first vestiges of homelessness, of people sleeping on the street, sleeping on steam grates. Some of you may remember that as homelessness began to emerge. By the 90s, it was a more serious problem with federal resources, and Jean has so eloquently discussed how our neighbors tried to respond to it. But I just think that it's important for us to keep in mind that homelessness is not inevitable, and there are things that we can do about it to solve it. And we hope to discuss some of those today. And Friendship Place is certainly doing many of those things.
Thanks. Harold, welcome. You've seen the program from the ground up. You've been a volunteer. You're now an advocate. Tell us an insider's view of Friendship Place.
Thank you, Ray. I have seen the problem of homelessness, as Nan mentioned, from the 70s. It wasn't recognized. It wasn't recognizable throughout the city. I think as the resources that handle the various types of mental illness and social problems, those resources went away. We started to see more and more people on the streets, which was, to me, was shocking and unusual. But now it's become more and more normal, which I think is not such a good thing. My particular case, I was actually an IT professional most of my career until the market crashed back in the 2009, 2010 area. And I found myself in danger of becoming homeless, which was caused me to go into a panic. And that's when I first reached out to to Friendship Place for employment assistance. So that drove me to view those people who I had been seeing on the street in a whole different light, because I was suddenly seeing myself there, and it was a scary view. So I came to Friendship Place at the time. They greeted me with compassion and professionalism and helped me navigate this employment situation to the point where I was confident that I had enough resources of my own to try and take another path towards self-sufficiency. Friendship Place has been an anchor for me, giving me the hope that I needed to navigate through that problem. And ever since then, I've been a volunteer and now a board member with Friendship Place for the last probably 6 years, and will continue to support Friendship Place as much as I can, in any way I can, as long as I can. So that's my story pretty much, but I have seen homelessness, not personally, but through friends and relatives, and every opportunity I can, I turn them towards Friendship Place for assistance because they have helped me. And I believe that they have a solution for everyone. Friendship Place has always projected their help in the non-cookie cutter format. Everyone's got individual needs and everyone has an individual solution. So Friendship Place has been adamant about helping people where they are and what they need. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us, Harold. Brenda Small is next. Brenda, how did you get involved and why do you stay involved with Friendship Place?
Well, thank you, Ray. That's a great question. Friendship Place actually is a treasure find for me. I was involved with the interfaith ministry and service to a homeless shelter downtown on 4th Street, the Open Door Women's Shelter. And once the church had completed its mission there in terms of serving the women once a month with gifting and again with prayer, there was a gap. I was looking for a new cause. And from the moment that I encountered Friendship Place, there was just the reception that was unbelievable. It was robust, it was full-bodied, and it had all the components that I was looking for. So as the universe opened up, there it was. I joined actually initially as a coach to interview and help prep the folks that were coming through to find employment. And lo and behold, I was approached to become a board member and have been engaged ever since. I'm a true believer in empowerment and a true believer in personal development and giving what I can to help others achieve and succeed. And that's why I'm still here. And I plan to be here for a while, I hope.
Well, great to have you with us today. Jean-Michel, bring us home in this opening round. How did you it occurs to me I don't know your story. I do register that you have some sort of accent, but I'm not clear on where. How did you end up in Washington, D.C. when you came here and at Friendship Place of all places?
Well, thank you, Ray, for being with us for yet another year moderating the symposium. And I want to thank also the mayor, President Obama, and the former First Lady for the very kind words. Well, yes, you do detect an accent, and
It's very slight, though. You have to really be paying attention.
I came to this country at 18 on my own and lived downtown San Francisco, and then moved to New England, and eventually to Baltimore, and then to Washington for a relationship, actually, which made me a neighbor of Friendship Place. I was only 10 minutes down the street back in the day, now living in Alexandria. And the calling, I think, has been, well, from my early experience, of course, as a young immigrant to this country, but also because I come from a family where there was mental illness, so major depression, basically. And the calling was always there. You know, I'm a linguist by trade. I'm supposed to be doing something else. But time after time, when career choices came up, I chose to recommit to human services. And I think at the core of it, for me, at Friendship Place, really what has kept me at Friendship Place all these years is the way we serve in a very person-centric, a very humble, solutions-based way that makes the whole difference, and I hope make people feel valued. And then, of course, there is this amazing community that we have at Friendship Place, from a co-founder from 30 years ago to somebody who joined the board last year, and everybody in between, and what we're able to do together as a community, I think is very powerful. Certainly, celebrating 30 years as an organization is a milestone. It's a critical year to be doing it. And today, I hope the conversation, of course, goes back to our roots, but looks forward as well, because I think we have a bright future ahead at Friendship Place. And I always say it's a very exciting time to work in homeless services, because we're building the models as we go along, from housing first, which allows us to welcome absolutely everybody with no questions asked, to the rapid solutions, as we call them at Friendship Place: prevention, rapid rehousing, and job first. One of our favorite models at Friendship Place, a model that puts people to work in a matter of 90 days, focusing on the hire. So I'm looking forward to a great conversation today.
Thank you, Jean-Michel Giraud. Let me remind our participants, the people who've joined us for the symposium, that we want to hear from you as well. So use the function down at the bottom to send us your questions, the points you'd like to make during this discussion. I will try to get to as many of you as possible. Your participation makes the program better. Thinking back 30 years to when Friendship Place was being founded and started, at that point, I was a reporter in Chicago and covering homelessness regularly as a part of my beat. There was a growing number of people living rough in that city, a city with a very harsh and dangerous winter. So there were no shortage of people who were dying on the streets during the worst months of the year. But that was also a time when urban America was in deep crisis. Rising crime, lowered economic expectations, hundreds of thousands of families heading out of the city. The problem wasn't high prices and high demand. There was a lot of unused inventory across many cities across the country. There was a structural problem. There was a social services problem, but there weren't literally not enough places to live. So that was one kind of problem. Fast forward 30 years, urban America has had something of a renaissance. So the central cities of Boston, of New York, of Chicago, of Washington, D.C., which has grown 160,000 in population since Friendship Place was founded. The problems seem to be, at first glance, different, even though some of them are the same. Nan Roman, what's the kind of the shape of the challenge now in 2021?
Well, I would say the driver of homelessness is the lack of affordable housing. We have about 7 million more households that need affordable housing than we have low-cost housing. And it's kind of a game of musical chairs. Who ends up getting that housing? The people who don't end up homeless. And it's often people with disabilities who are poorer and have more challenges that are not winning in that game. There are lots of other issues, certainly, but I think the driver is housing affordability. That's also the solution, because people, notwithstanding other problems they may have, once you get somebody into housing, they're not homeless anymore. They still may need services and assistance, and Friendship Place certainly does do that where that's the case. But the housing is kind of the major issue at the moment, I would say.
Jean, was it in the original design, the DNA of Friendship Place, that you had to understand from the get-go that just getting somebody with a roof over their head wasn't the end of the story?
Yeah, we started out with actually the first sort of formal activity that we undertook was to hire a street outreach worker, Gillian Wood. Many of you will remember her, and her job was basically to go out on the street and start talking to homeless men and women who were living in the neighborhood and find out what they needed. And she came back with the very clear understanding that they needed medical services, they need psychiatric mental health services, they needed a whole range, they needed linking with benefits, a whole range of services. So it was very clear right from the homeless neighbors that there was a multiplicity of service needs. And so the design, it was really built into the DNA of the organization at the first drop-in center up on Wisconsin Avenue, that it would be a multi-pronged service center. And some of those services came to the street and still to this day take place on the street, right, delivered where homeless neighbors are living.
Brenda Small, this is one of those societal problems where it's easy to look away, where it's easy to hope that it can remain out of sight, out of mind, and yet doesn't necessarily respond to just there being enough money. I mean, this isn't just a problem of money. Does Washington, is it even conscious that there is a homelessness problem here? If you're not going to the places where people are spending a lot of their days out on the street, is it possible to just look away?
Ray, that's another great question. And I'm sure that the answer is twofold. For some people, yes, they do look away. I am actually a licensed residential associate broker with a major brokerage here. And I have been licensed for 28 years. And that involves building real estate relationships. I think so much of the homelessness problem, yes, is a physical one in terms of the lack of affordable housing. And we know, particularly these days, actually even the last several years, there has been a lack of inventory for everybody. So it's not just a homelessness problem. It's an everybody's problem now because there's just not enough housing to meet the demand. And we're seeing people who actually can afford to go into or purchase housing now fall by the side of the fence, right? They're sitting on the fence now as a result. And who does that typically affect? Primarily our low to moderate income borrowers. So much of it also involves policy changes. And I'm engaged with the National Association of Realtors in that regard. Also our local Association of Realtors, our DC Association of Realtors, the Maryland Association of Realtors, and Delaware. We're all encountering the very same issues when it comes to housing people and housing them.
Let me jump in right there.
Sure.
On these organizations, are they talking much about homelessness, or trying to figure out just how to get more inventory online to serve their customers?
A combination. We are talking a lot about how to get more inventory, how to be more creative, how to actually align ourselves with our local governments, our national government. So there's a lot of day-to-day being on Capitol Hill, doing lobbying, again, downtown in DC, making sure that we are discussing and collaborating with our local officials. The other thing I think, or area that I think we need to explore, probably more so, more robustly, is collaboration with our commercial market, our commercial lenders, and look at how we can build moving forward. You know, what about sustainable housing? Does housing have to look exactly the way it does today? What about some other types of models? What about vacant land? So I think there's a number of other areas that we could certainly explore as well. But I think, again, it's a twofold problem. Yes, some will look away and some do. Many of us who are engaged in our communities and with our associations are looking for solutions.
Thank you for teeing up creative solutions, because I want to get to them in just a little while. But first, let me go to Jean-Michel and ask how, well, actually, let me go to Jean-Michel later. Jean, let me go to you and ask how the city has changed and how that's affected the nature of the challenge, the nature of the problem. When we're talking about people now ready to spend $750,000 for an apartment in a neighborhood that you couldn't even get people to take a look at 15 years ago, does that constrain your freedom of movement, make it harder to get people into shelter in a way that makes sense for all the stakeholders involved and keeps them housed, not into precarious housing, but into longitudinal housing?
Well, the city certainly has changed, and the person who kicked off our symposium today deserves great credit for the change in attitude in the city. Mayor Bowser's leadership on the creation of affordable housing and suitable transitional housing for homeless people in every ward of the city has just been absolutely magnificent. And I think we really appreciate her and cheer her on. When we first got started, and I think Claudia Coonrod's probably on the call with us. Some of the co-founders established the Community Housing Trust, understanding that we would have to actually purchase and create housing assets so that people could come in off the street into their own apartments and into transitional housing. One of the big challenges was, as you point out, Ray, the sustainability of housing solutions for homeless people. So you might get in if you were lucky, but staying in and staying stable long enough to be able to actually put the life back together and get employment and reconnect with family and get stable was a huge challenge. I think we ought to recognize the synagogues and the churches who played an incredibly important role in providing space, be it in their boiler rooms or their expanded closets or in apartments that they adopted and paid the rent for, or houses that they gave over to providing transitional housing for homeless people. I think they get great credit. I think the other thing that has changed somewhat is the very, very strong NIMBYism attitude, particularly among the more affluent areas of the city. I mean, not that NIMBYism has gone away. We certainly saw it when Friendship Place was opening the Brooks, beautiful Brooks residence in Northwest Washington. But alongside the very strong and fearful neighbors who were concerned were very strong and experienced neighbors who said, we've done this before. We know we can do this. We're going to surround this housing building with love and with support. And so I do see significant changes. And I think a lot of it comes from informed neighbors and folks who are experienced in participating with person-centered services and know they can come alongside an organization like Friendship Place.
Harold, as a Friendship Place, excuse me, as a Friendship Place volunteer, you've worked with the clients who come to Friendship Place for services. What would you want people to know about those men and women? What should they know about those men and women as we move forward and try to continue the work on solving the problem of homelessness in the district?
Well, Ray, I can tell you that Friendship Place has never failed to provide very professional staff. I've actually observed them, worked with them as a volunteer, as you say, to mentor some of our clients who've come for assistance, for help, and I've seen that staff in action. Again, Friendship Place does not apply a cookie cutter technique of processing everyone as the same. We all have different situations and different needs. In Friendship Place, the counselors, the caseworkers are wonderful. I call those guys, they're the boots on the ground. They're the soldiers on the field, on the front line. And they have gone out and seen some, I guess, devastating life stories have come through their caseloads. And not shaken, applied logic, applied reality, given them solutions, customized for the uniqueness of the cases that they see. I haven't seen them fail one person. I've seen people fail themselves who come in and just refuse help, but I haven't seen once a client has come into the office and told his story, asked for help, and then applied that help that's given them. I've seen success time and time and time again. And I have to say compliments to all of our administrative staff to go out and find these great young people whose heart is in their work. Of course, we all know that this type of work is not the best paying work in the city. I mean, a lot of these young people have so many talents that they could get lots of money working in other environments, but they choose to come and stay with human services, if you will, to help our human partners in this Washington metropolitan area to find homes, to reunite their families, to get off of substance abuse, to, there's so many ways that we help our clients form a normal and readjustment, rejoin society, if you will, for ex-offenders, there's so many ways that they're helping the unique situations that come through their office. And I just want to say, we've got the greatest guys, and I happen to have sat on committees with them and worked with them and enjoyed every minute of being associated with these great social workers, if you will.
Jean-Michel, sorry, I started to bring you in and then went in another direction, but that only proves that this is a live program. Let's go back to your earliest days of involvement with Friendship Place. How has the nature of homelessness in the district and in the region changed during your involvement with Friendship Place?
Well, I joined in 2006, so 15 years ago, actually. Friendship Place was a smaller organization. We had $1 million budget, 17 people on the staff, half of the staff on the night shift in 3 different residences. Homelessness was different than Ray. There were many more people living in chronic homelessness, so people who were on the street had been for months, years, occasionally decades. Really, the pivotal time for us when things really changed at Friendship Place was in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis. And it took a while. It didn't just happen in 2008, but by 2009, 10, we were seeing a population change to more people who had been displaced by the crisis. And that's really what triggered us to change our practices, realizing, for instance, at the Blue House, our welcome center, our 4713 Wisconsin, when I would go down, that people in the room looked as if they could work, and we weren't doing anything about that. So we created Aim Higher, and with this job first, philosophy, which puts the higher first. It's very effective. It's we're conscious of time. The time we use, we know, is not ours. People who are living in homelessness need jobs now. It made us think in a totally different way. Rapid rehousing for veterans was the same year, 2011. And again, it started small, but took us to the regions level. Now it's a very large outfit with funding from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Prevention and any thoughts we had, anything we could put in there to really change these models year after year by listening to the most important people, the folks in the programs, people sharing their needs, people sharing their wants, their preferences, and looking at people as people, parents, grandparents, single people. Everybody in the service delivery is a person, and it's at the core of what we do. So I think we're fortunate to be able to adapt in a nimble way to the way homelessness was changing in the city. And certainly, the crisis, as I mentioned, was a main driver for us, but also the fact that Mayor Fenty decided to implement housing first at the city level in 2008. And that changed our model. We were using an abstinence model. So for those people on the call who may not know what that is, you had to answer questions about addiction. Had you used in the last 180 days? If you said yes, you were being honest, and we basically couldn't give you the apartment. So we were aware that we were leaving people behind, and that was very unsettling, of course. Housing first, which again is come as you are. So you may share that you're in addiction, you may share that you have mental illness. We're going to guide you toward whatever progress you want to make in that area, but your housing comes first. You deserve housing. You've been on the street, you deserve housing. For us, it was, it took us on a trajectory to change, really, because it opened up our thinking. And I'll end with this. I think we removed our moral judgment on housing when we adopted this philosophy. So, it's really amazing also that the progress at Friendship Place has reflected the change in the field. The hot and the cot you got 35 years ago when you entered the shelter, the hot meal and the cot you slept on. And then somebody said, well, with services, people will make progress. Then somebody said, well, housing would be good, but lots of conditions. And then housing first, and then the rapid solutions post-crisis. We have been able to position ourselves to serve folks who need us the most for the long term, families, singles, and then folks who need us for 3 months and have the rest of their lives without us to look forward to.
I want to move to audience questions in just a moment, but before I do, and please add them down in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Nan, I just want to ask a quick question before we move to the audience. Are we on the verge of another crisis, given that right now, hundreds of thousands of families are not just a little behind, but way behind on their rent, and it's unclear what the future is for renters at a time of still very high unemployment, a lot of unpaid bills from 2020. Are we, absent some legislative fix, about to see a wave of evictions?
It's very possible that we're on the brink of a wave of increased homelessness. Increased homelessness tends to be a lagging indicator after things like recessions and the eviction situation. So I don't expect it would happen in the next 3 to 6 months, but I would guess in 9 to 12 months, we should be looking out for that. There is a lot of money for emergency rental assistance to stop evictions, $45 billion to prevent evictions by giving people resources to pay their rent. It's also important, just parenthetically, to recognize that by the eviction moratorium is also affecting landlords, and in particular small landlords. A lot of the affordable housing stock is owned by smaller landlords that have a few units that they basically is either their entire income or their retirement plan. And those folks are not getting paid. I mean, no one's getting paid. So there are lots of implications here. Just very quickly too, there is a lot of money has been a lot of money in the CARES Act and the Rescue Act and coming up in the Recovery Act and to help people who are homeless. And I think we could get a lot of people into housing who are currently homeless. But I am worried about what comes after, not just for evictions, but also because While the economy is doing well, it's not doing well for lower income people, and lower income people, there's likely to be a very high unemployment rate. There's also a big part of the increase of the emergence of homelessness in the early 80s. The main thing was housing affordability, but another thing that happened was that there was a young youth cohort, a large group of youth 18 to 26, who failed to attach to the job market because there were 2 recessions in association with that. And that was the largest group of homeless people then, and it's still the largest group of homeless people. We have a similar situation now where we have a youth cohort, 18 to 26, not as big as that one in the 80s, but bigger than the average age distribution. And they are going to be trying to get jobs in this market that's not going to be so good for lower income, lower paying jobs. And of course, their education has been totally upended by the whole pandemic related school problems. So in short, Ray, there's a lot to be concerned about moving forward. And we need organizations like Friendship Place that have capacity to really push hard on getting as many people who are currently homeless into housing with the resources from the federal government. And hopefully we won't be backfilling those shelter beds moving ahead.
Anne asks, I was recently in Texas where there was a referendum to outlaw living on the street in Austin, and the governor is threatening a statewide ban. Can anyone comment on this effort to criminalize homelessness, which seems both immoral and futile, and what's happening in this regard in DC? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I can speak just briefly to the criminalization issue. There have been court cases on this, and there was a federal court decision that prohibits people from criminalizing homelessness jurisdictions, and unless there is a bed for everyone. In other words, you have if there's not a bed on offer and you have no choice but to live on the street, you can't arrest somebody. Texas is going up against that, and I'm sure there'll be court battles about that. It makes no sense to arrest people who are living outside because they have no other option. It's just costly. It involves, using the criminal justice system, which is a costly system. At the end of the day, you haven't housed anybody unless you've housed them in jail or prison, which is considerably more expensive than housing them in an apartment. It really it doesn't achieve anything. But I think Jean brought up about neighbors, and there is a lot of backlash, to be honest, around the country against unsheltered people and people sleeping outside. And people in the neighborhoods don't want to see it, and they're mad at governments for not solving it.
June asks, is there much or any discussion among the city and or the commercial real estate community about using vacant office space for affordable housing? Do you consider this option to be a viable one? Brenda, why don't you take that one?
Thank you for that, Ray. That's one of the areas I think that we do need to, when I say we, both realtor associations as well as our local government officials need to look more into. There is excess commercial space as a result of the pandemic. And I do know that, again, I'm not a commercial practitioner, but that our commercial partners are in fact already looking at that. They're looking at multi-use or uses for many of those vacant spaces. How they can retrofit and how they can actually reposture and reuse both, residential for retail as well as housing, condos, townhomes. I mean, you name it. So that is in the works. The National Association of Realtors also is looking into with the states how they can develop incentives for investors and for developers to ease some of the burden for them so that they are more amenable to actually building new housing. And again, variable types of housing. So I think it's in the works. I believe it probably needs a step up to happen for sure, and just more collaborative effort.
Is code a barrier? I mean, if you were intending originally to build someplace as commercial space and now you want it to be housing instead, does that act as an impediment to allow people to live in that space? The requirements for certain kinds of wiring and HVAC and certain number of bathrooms per square feet and that kind of thing. I mean, does that end up being, either on purpose or by accident, a barrier to getting people into emergency housing?
That's a good question as well. I probably would defer that to a commercial practitioner, but we've done innovative things before. We've found ways to build many, many types of structures before. And so I don't buy that excuse, right? I just don't. We can make it happen, and we just need to make it happen.
Jean-Michel, is code a barrier to getting people into either transitional or permanent housing?
Well, I think it's fair to say that code is used as a barrier, yes. In some places, some cities and towns, it's intentional, and it's a way to keep affordable housing out of neighborhoods, unfortunately. I think Nan could probably chime in on that more effectively than I am, but I'm on a regional group looking at affordable housing for the Council of Governments, so this Maryland, Virginia, and DC, and we're hearing throughout the region, yes, that in some locations it is used, and we know that historically anyway, it has been used to keep affordable housing buildings out of neighborhoods.
Peter asks, men and women leaving DC's prisons obviously need help rejoining society. As a former Friendship Place board member and supervisor of the St. Albans Parish Homeless Shelter, I've seen firsthand the difficulty of this group's challenges in finding employment and acceptance. I would appreciate a few words on Friendship Place's approach to helping former prisoners return to society and more generally to employment. Harold Sims, can you help us there?
Yes, Ray. I find that returning citizens are some of the most vulnerable to become homeless. And even worse than that, they're vulnerable for becoming repeat offenders for the most petty of offenses. That all will work against them in the effort for finding employment. But at Friendship Place, I've noticed the counselors, I've noticed the social workers and the case workers overcoming this by helping these returning citizens, first of all, to gain employment. We think employment is the key to re-entering society in a positive way, to finding a home, a place to live, or regaining contacts with the community and their families. So this can happen, and it does happen, but there are significant barriers for people who are returning citizens. They have to work twice as hard, but they do get the help that Friendship Place provides them, and it is a doable task to get returning citizens reintegrated back into society as positively functional groups in our society. So it can work, it does work, but there are obstacles, and that's no doubt about that. We could use all the help we can, and in a lot of cases, our religious communities are stepping in to overlook these types of marks that might be on the returning citizens' records that would prevent them otherwise from regaining entry to society. It's a moral question. If a person is willing to change their ways, to adapt to the need at hand, there are several communities in the Washington metropolitan area that would welcome them and have welcomed them and gotten them reintegrated into society. So this is a
Thanks, Harold.
Success story, yes.
Tom asks, since we're talking about opening up housing to people with addictions who may not be as attentive to taking care of the properties, have you found more damage and loss of property to others needing help? And I guess the thrust of the question is how to keep an eye on that, how to not let transitional housing become a place that that degrades in quality, which would only fuel neighborhood opposition, I would think. Who wants to handle that?
Well, I could speak to that.
And then Jean, go ahead.
So Jean, okay, great. Well, it's a question that's at the core of the debate on housing first, and housing first is a way to get people into housing who are living on the street or in large shelters as quickly and safely as possible so their health outcomes can improve. The way we work with folks in addiction is that we have trained staff who are able to use practices like motivational interviewing that helps somebody examine their own ambivalence around change. Change is a key factor in addiction recovery. And the staff are trained to give people solutions to go toward recovery, for instance, join the AANA fellowship and so on, seek help from rehab programs if needed. But there is no, the person has the entire choice, makes the decision, drives their own life. And I think that's key coming, from a background professionally of mental health and addiction recovery, and seeing the way we were working with people before and the way we are working with people now. I think Housing First represents progress. It's a fair system in that, in a building like the ones some of us live in, or if you're in a house next to you, you don't worry what somebody does in the evening, whether they consume drugs or alcohol. Why? Because they pay their own rent or their own mortgage. But with people experiencing homelessness for a long time, we were telling the people, well, in order to get an apartment, you need to be better than everybody else, right? You need to earn this apartment. So we've removed that, and I think that's essential in dealing with people. I think it's fundamental in human services if you truly put the person first. And I really want to talk about maybe stigmatization, because there is no reason to believe that anybody who is consuming, in their house or apartment in the evening when nobody is around, which is the great majority of the time, because these folks receive support, once a week or something like that, that they would actually damage their apartments any more than other people. We're not seeing damage caused by addiction. These are folks who often are in functional addiction also. And then I'll end on this because I know, Jean, you want to chime in, but functional addiction is such an opportunity for us at Aim Higher, for instance, because if somebody can carve out the 8 hours, 10 hours it takes to hang on to a job, that's just great. You're going to help that person become more self-sufficient. And also, when you study addiction recovery, you see that people change for the community because of people around them. They make changes in their consuming habits. And so work is a socializer. People in addiction need more social opportunities to do better, and need a community to recover in. So functional addiction allows us to, to put people in jobs who otherwise probably would have been overlooked before. So I think we need to look at addiction in terms of what it is, something that can be managed by people, and mental illness the same way, right? We're in the illness management phase and have been in it for a long time on the mental health side. If we look at people's potential and their ability to lead happier lives based on what they're able to do, I think we're in a better place.
Let me move to Jean, because Jean, the times I've covered this as a story, a lot of that anxiety is anticipatory. As Jean-Michel notes, there hasn't actually been a degradation of building quality, but that's what neighborhood people are projecting onto the service provider the possibility of a decline in housing, in the quality of housing, because people who have not been securely housed are not going to take care of the place where they're living and so on. How do you combat that anticipatory anxiety?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, to start with being understanding, and for most of us, our greatest asset is our home and our mortgage that we've been gradually paying off. And so, a concern about the value of the asset is very real, and people feel very vulnerable about that kind of thing. Some years ago, under the Campaign for New Community, which is funded by the Public Welfare Fund and Robert Wood Johnson, Michael Deere did a very comprehensive study of property values and the siting of non-market housing, and really at that time did a review that showed that there was not a measurable impact. In fact, looking across the studies, I think Jean-Michel said it so well. This is about stigma, and it's about education. It's about awareness raising, and fortunately there are fair housing laws that protect and civil rights laws that protect somebody who is living with a disability, be it mental illness or addiction, from discrimination. And I think one of the things that Friendship Place has done so well over the years has been that mediator, the broker, helping to navigate the opening of the possibility of housing first, so that someone can go in and actually claim that housing space with dignity and with full responsibility, as Jean-Michel explains. So babying the consumer, as users at Friendship Place are termed, babying the consumer is not part of a dignified response. So he said it very well.
Well, we're about to wrap up the program, but rather than go to the entire panel for final remarks, let me just ask if anybody wants to add some final comments before I go back to Jean-Michel to close. Anyone? Anything that you heard that you want to add to or hook onto or reiterate or anything like that?
So Ray, I'd like to just make
Go ahead, Brenda.
several comments. I think one, just the term or use of the word homelessness. I think we all need to be very mindful that the profile and the face of homeless people can be just like you or I. Ask the people last year who fell upon hard times during the pandemic, who lost their jobs. So I think people tend to look at homelessness as chronic homelessness, as Jean-Michel had mentioned earlier. I think education and awareness is definitely in order. And I think we just all need to be mindful of humanity, that we need to be more humane about our neighbors, whoever they may be, and help them get a leg up. Most people do not want to be homeless. They happen upon being homeless. I quickly just recall when I was serving at the Open Door, there was a woman who would always say, she was always very nicely dressed. And she would say, I'm going to get my own place soon. I'm going to get my own place soon. And one would think, well, she's among this homeless population, she's just kind of talking. Lo and behold, there was an evening I was shopping in our local Giant, and this woman actually acknowledged me. And she said, do you remember me? And I don't recall her name now. And I did remember her. And she said, I remember you praying for me. And she was in her own place. She was so proud of that. So I share that story because there is hope. And everyone who is homeless is not chronically homeless. It just may be a temporary situation. And it could, as I said, given a situation or an incident, it could be any of us. And I think if we see our own faces in the faces of many of these people that have fallen upon hard times, we would have a different perspective. Thank you.
Okay, Jean-Michel, thanks, Brenda. Take us home.
Well, I want to thank you again, Ray, for moderating for us. You're great. We appreciate you. Thank all the panelists. Thank you for sharing. I think this was a very interesting conversation and certainly thought-provoking for me. Celebrating 30 years is a milestone in any human services organization. I want to thank everybody who has helped us through the years, and I know many of you are on the call. Thank you to all the donors. Some people have been asking what Friendship Place is ready to do post-COVID to respond to the greater need. And I wanted to share that we have grown our veteran services and aim higher, and that we are talking to the city about doing much more work in permanent supportive housing. We will also look for opportunities, as we always do, to develop these new models that we like, that put people first and represents solutions to end people's homelessness. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I want to just take a moment or two to thank everyone for being part of this. So thank you.